Oh, dear daughter-in-law, it seems we left our wallet at home, and the cards too, Lisbeth said with a playful chuckle, her eyes glinting with expectation. The table erupted in laughter as her husband, Cornelis, joined in, their mirth echoing through the lavish restaurant where the family had gathered for a grand dinner. The bill, a staggering 200,000, arrived, and the in-laws' laughter rang even louder, as if the absurdity of the situation was a private joke. But their joviality came to an abrupt halt when Annalisa, seated calmly at the table, spoke with a quiet resolve that cut through the noise like a blade. Annalisa had married Don not solely out of love, but with a fragile, flickering hope of building the kind of family she had longed for as a child, one filled with warmth, unity, and mutual support. Her own childhood had been a patchwork of discord, her parents entangled in endless arguments, their voices sharp with resentment. They had never managed to provide her with the sense of security and love she craved. Don, with his soft demeanor and apparent inability to navigate life's complexities, seemed to Annalisa like a gentle soul in need of guidance. She saw in him a kind of innocence, a childlike quality that stirred her protective instincts. Having grown accustomed to shouldering responsibility from a young age, Annalisa embraced this role with a quiet determination, believing she could nurture him into the partner she dreamed of. In the early days of their marriage, things seemed promising. Don was attentive, his affection genuine, even if tinged with a certain immaturity. He frequently sought his mother's advice on matters big and small, from career decisions to trivial household choices. At first, Annalisa dismissed this as a sign of his deep family ties, a trait she found endearing. She held on to the hope that, with time, he would grow into a more independent man, capable of standing on his own. She reassured herself that his reliance on his mother, Lisbeth, was temporary, a phase that would fade as their marriage matured. But reality soon painted a different picture. It became painfully clear that Annalisa's financial stability far outstripped Don's. He worked as a mid-level manager at a modest firm, earning a respectable salary that might have sufficed for a simpler life. Yet he squandered much of it on his passions, fishing trips that required expensive gear, hunting excursions with costly equipment, and the latest high-end gadgets that gleamed briefly before being replaced. Annalisa, by contrast, held a prestigious position as the financial director of a prominent company. Her income was substantial, and her meticulous approach to money management ensured their household remained secure. She had always prided herself on her ability to plan, save, and invest wisely, a skill honed through years of self-reliance. From the outset of their marriage, Don's parents, Lisbeth and Cornelis, made a habit of organizing lavish family gatherings. In the beginning, these were cozy affairs, intimate dinners filled with laughter and shared stories. But as time passed, the events grew increasingly extravagant. Birthdays became grand spectacles, anniversaries transformed into opulent celebrations, and even minor milestones warranted gatherings that rivaled high society galas. Relatives and friends, some distant and barely known, filled the guest lists. The tables groaned under the weight of gourmet dishes, and the venues, always upscale restaurants or banquet halls, reflected a taste for luxury that Annalise soon realized she was expected to underwrite. Lisbeth had a particular talent for dropping subtle yet pointed hints. "Oh, Annalisa, you're so brilliant with budgets," she'd say with a warm smile that never reached her eyes. Or, "Don's hopeless with these things, but you're such a clever woman." Her words were laced with flattery, but their intent was clear. Annalisa was to foot the bill. Don, for his part, offered no resistance. He nodded along with his mother's suggestions, his silence a tacit agreement that this was simply how things were. "You earn more, Annalisa. It's no trouble for you," he'd say with a shrug, oblivious to the weight his words carried. To him it was a practical arrangement, not a burden unfairly placed on his wife's shoulders. At first, Annalisa complied without protest. She wanted to be the ideal wife, the perfect daughter-in-law who seamlessly integrated into her new family. She yearned for their approval, for the sense of belonging she had never known growing up. She bought extravagant gifts for her in-laws, a designer handbag for Lisbeth, a sleek watch for Cornelis. She organized elaborate celebrations, ensuring every detail was flawless. She paid restaurant bills without flinching, even as the totals climbed into the tens of thousands. To her, these were sacrifices worth making for the sake of family harmony, a small price to pay for the love and acceptance she so desperately sought. But the costs began to mount, both financially and emotionally. The family's demands grew insatiable. There were overseas vacations to luxurious resorts, custom furniture for Lisbeth and Cornelis's home, top-of-the-line appliances, and even a full renovation of their apartment, all funded by Annalisa's earnings. She watched her savings dwindle, her personal aspirations deferred. She stopped buying new clothes, skipped vacations of her own, and cut back on small pleasures like dining out with friends, all to accommodate the family's ever-growing expectations. Yet no matter how much she gave, it was never enough. Lisbeth's requests became bolder, cloaked in feigned concern for Don or their future grandchildren. "You wouldn't want Don to feel embarrassed, would you?" she'd say. Or, "It's for the family, Annalisa." You understand. Annalisa felt a slow-burning resentment take root. She worked grueling hours, her days consumed by high-stakes meetings and complex financial strategies, only to see her earnings siphoned off to fund a lifestyle she didn't choose. She began to feel like a stranger in her own life, her identity reduced to a provider, a role she had never signed up for. Memories of her childhood surfaced unbidden, her mother's weary face after long shifts, her father's absence, the weight of responsibility Annalisa had carried even as a girl. She had vowed to build a different life, one filled with love and mutual respect. Instead, she found herself trapped in a cycle of obligation, her efforts unacknowledged, her sacrifices unseen. The breaking point came when Lisbeth approached her with yet another request. "Annalisa, my back is simply unbearable," she lamented, her voice dripping with practiced woe. "The doctors insist I need a spa retreat, a proper one, for my health. But Cornelis and we just can't afford it on our pensions. You understand, don't you?" Annalisa felt a surge of anger as she silently handed over her credit card to cover the cost. The act was mechanical, but inside she was unraveling. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about dignity, about fairness, about her right to a life of her own. She could no longer ignore the truth. She was being exploited, and her silence was enabling it. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind, sharp and unyielding. "Don't let anyone ride on your back, my dear, or you'll spend your life carrying their burdens." Her grandmother had been a woman of fierce independence, her wisdom forged in hardship. Annalisa wished she had listened sooner, but now, as Lisbeth's anniversary approached, she knew the time for change had come. She could no longer live as a bystander in her own story. She resolved to end the financial exploitation, to reclaim her autonomy, even if it meant risking the fragile family ties she had worked so hard to maintain. Annalisa meticulously planned her next steps. The anniversary celebration, a grand affair orchestrated by Lisbeth, would be the stage for her stand. She knew her actions would spark outrage, perhaps even fracture the family. But she was prepared. She spent days gathering evidence. Every receipt, every bank statement, every invoice that documented her contributions to Don's family. She compiled them into a folder, a tangible record of her sacrifices. She wasn't seeking revenge. She wanted clarity, for herself and for them. She wanted to speak the truth she had buried for too long. On the day of the anniversary, Annalise arrived at the restaurant with a calm that belied the storm within her. The venue was a vision of elegance, with crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over tables adorned with fresh flowers and flickering candles. The air was thick with the aroma of roasted meats, fine wines, and decadent desserts. Guests milled about, their laughter mingling with the soft strains of a string quartet. Lisbeth, resplendent in a tailored dress, held court at the head of the table, her smile radiant as she accepted compliments and gifts. Cornelis, ever the quiet counterpart, sat beside her, his expression one of understated contentment. Don, seated next to Annalisa, seemed uneasy, his eyes darting to her as if sensing the tension she carried. Annalisa sat poised, her face a mask of composure. Inside, her emotions churned, anger, fear, determination, and a quiet sorrow for the family she had tried to build. She felt like an outsider, watching the celebration unfold as if through a glass wall. The guests' smiles, the clinking of glasses, the effusive toasts, it all felt hollow, a performance she could no longer endure. She had played the role of the dutiful wife for too long, and the weight of it was crushing her. As the evening progressed, the guests raised their glasses, offering heartfelt wishes for Lisbeth and Cornelis's long and happy life together. Lisbeth basked in the attention, her speeches laced with self-congratulation as she recounted her sacrifices for her family and the love they showered upon her. Cornelis nodded quietly, content to let her shine. Don, too, stood to offer a toast, his words filled with gratitude for his parents' guidance and love. Annalisa listened, her heart heavy with a bitter irony. To her, Don's words rang false, a reflection of a world where her contributions were invisible, her role reduced to a silent benefactor. The meal reached its peak, with waiters gliding between tables, serving platters of exquisite dishes. The guests savored every bite, their conversations buzzing with gossip and laughter. Lisbeth, ever the performer, regaled the crowd with tales of her travels, her latest purchases, and her connections with influential figures. Annalise sat in silence, her food untouched, her mind racing. She could feel the moment approaching, the point of no return. When the bill arrived, the waiter discreetly placed it before Lisbeth. She glanced at it with practiced nonchalance and, as expected, turned to Annalisa with a saccharine smile. "Oh, dear Annalisa, you'll take care of this, won't you?" As always. The words hung in the air, heavy with assumption. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Annalisa. The guests waited, accustomed to her compliance, her quiet acquiescence to the family's demands. But this time, Annalisa didn't reach for her purse. Instead, she met Lisbeth's gaze with a steady, unflinching look. There was no fear in her eyes, no hesitation, only a weary resolve. Slowly she reached for the box containing the gift envelopes the guests had brought for the anniversary couple. She opened it and began counting the cash inside. her voice calm but deliberate. "Here's 230,000, she said, her words ringing clear in the hushed room. "That should cover the bill." Then, with a measured grace, she pulled a thick folder from her bag, a dossier she had prepared with care. "And this," she said, holding it up for all to see, "is a little something extra for your anniversary." She opened the folder, revealing a meticulously organized collection of documents, receipts, bank statements, invoices, each one a testament to the financial burden she had carried. "This is everything I've spent on your family over the past year," she continued, flipping through the pages. "Groceries, utility bills, car repairs, gifts, vacations, entertainment, every luxury you've enjoyed, paid for with my money." The room was enveloped in a stunned silence. The guests stared, some with wide eyes, others with discomfort, as the weight of her words settled over them. Lisbeth's face flushed a deep crimson, her expression a mix of fury and humiliation. Don sat frozen, his mouth slightly agape, unable to process the scene unfolding before him. Cornelis averted his gaze, his hands clasped tightly in his lap as if wishing to disappear. Annalise's voice remained steady, though her heart pounded. "The total comes to nearly 1,000,000 rubles, she said, her tone unwavering. 1,000,000 rubles earned through my hard work, spent on your pleasures without a single thought for what it cost me, not just in money, but in time, in dreams, in my own happiness." She paused, letting her words sink in, her eyes sweeping across the faces of the guests. "Today I'm done. I will no longer pay for your indulgences. I'm tired of being your cash cow, your safety net. I want to live my life, to pursue what brings me joy, to spend my money on myself." Lisbeth sat rigid, her face a mask of stone. Cornelis seemed to shrink further into his chair, his discomfort palpable. Don looked as though the air had been knocked out of him, his eyes blinking rapidly as he struggled to comprehend her words. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the faint clink of a glass as someone shifted uncomfortably. Annalisa rose from her seat, leaving her dessert untouched. She felt the weight of every gaze in the room but refused to falter. She had done what she came to do. The truth was out, laid bare for all to see. Now she would face whatever came next. Don snapped out of his daze, leaping to his feet and nearly toppling his wine glass. "Annalisa, what are you doing?" he rasped, his voice thick with shock. "Why would you air all this in front of everyone?" She stopped, turning to face him. Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "Because this concerns everyone, Don, and because I can no longer stay silent." She saw the confusion in his eyes, the childlike bewilderment of a man unaccustomed to confronting hard truths. Don had always avoided problems, hiding behind his mother or her, expecting them to shield him from reality. But now, that reality was undeniable, and he was unprepared. Lisbeth recovered, her face contorted with rage. "How dare you!" she spat, rising from her chair with a dramatic flourish. "You've ruined my anniversary, humiliated us in front of our guests." Annalisa sighed, weary but resolute. She had anticipated this reaction. Lisbeth would never take responsibility, always deflecting blame onto others. "I didn't come here to humiliate anyone," Annalisa replied, her voice steady despite the storm within. "I came to tell the truth, a truth you've all ignored for far too long." Lisbeth scoffed, her eyes flashing with disdain. "Your truth? You're just jealous of our happiness. You think we don't see how you resent Don, how you want to turn him against us." Annalisa felt a surge of anger, years of suppressed frustration rising to the surface. She had endured countless slights, manipulations, and accusations, but she would not be silenced now. "I don't resent Don," she said, her gaze locked on Lisbeth's. "I want him to be his own man, to make his own choices, to earn his own way, to take responsibility for his life. But you've kept him tethered, trapped in a gilded cage, never letting him grow into the man he could be." Lisbeth raised her hand as if to strike, her face twisted with fury, but Don caught her wrist. "Mom, stop," he pleaded, his voice trembling. "Please, just stop." Lisbeth wrenched her hand free, turning on him with venom. "You were never weak," she hissed. "She's the one who's made you this way." Annalisa shook her head, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "It's not me, Lisbeth. It's you. You've controlled every aspect of his life, every decision, every step. You've never given him the chance to stand on his own." Cornelis, who had remained silent throughout, finally spoke, his voice soft but heavy with resignation. "Lisbeth, maybe Annalisa is right," he said, his eyes fixed on the table. "Maybe we need to reflect on this." Lisbeth turned on him, her expression one of betrayal. "You've always been spineless," she snapped. "And now you side with her?" Cornelis fell silent, his shoulders slumping. Annalisa felt a pang of pity for him. He was as trapped in this dynamic as she had been, a quiet man caught in the shadow of his wife's domineering presence. She turned to Don, who stood motionless, his head bowed. She could see the turmoil in him, the pull of loyalty to his mother warring with the dawning realization of the truth. She knew this moment was agonizing for him, but she also knew he had to choose his path. "I'm done paying for other people's pleasures," Annalisa said, her voice quieter now but no less firm. The words carried the weight of a final judgment. The guests, once animated, now avoided her gaze, their discomfort palpable. The air was thick with tension, broken only by the occasional clink of cutlery or a nervous cough. Everyone knew they had witnessed something profound, a reckoning that shattered the facade of familial bliss. Don remained speechless, his usual refuge, his mother's protection, gone. For the first time he couldn't hide, couldn't deflect. He looked at Annalisa as if seeing her for the first time, a woman transformed by her own strength. All these years he had taken her for granted, viewing her as a dependable provider, a selfless partner who would always put the family first. Now that illusion had crumbled. Annalisa felt both drained and liberated, as if she had shed a heavy cloak that had smothered her for years. She gave Don one last look, searching for a sign of the man she had once hoped he could become. There was a flicker of regret in his eyes, but it was too little, too late. "I'm leaving," she said softly, her voice carrying across the silent room. She offered no farewells, no explanations. Everything that needed to be said had been laid bare. She turned and walked toward the exit, her steps steady despite the weight of the moment. Behind her, she heard Lisbeth's angry outbursts, Don's faltering attempts to respond, and the low murmur of shocked guests. She didn't look back. Stepping into the cool night air, Annalisa felt the city's pulse around her, cars humming, lights flickering, life moving forward as if nothing had changed. But for her, everything had. This was the moment she had crossed into a new chapter, one where she would define her own future. Back at her apartment, a modest space she had purchased before her marriage, Annalisa felt a profound sense of peace. This was her sanctuary, a place untouched by Lisbeth's demands or Don's passivity. The walls held no trace of the ostentatious luxury her in-laws craved, only the quiet comfort of her own belongings, books stacked neatly on shelves, framed photos of moments that mattered to her, a life built on her own terms. She sank onto her bed, exhausted but awake, her mind replaying the evening's events. She thought of her childhood, her mother's sacrifices, her father's absence. She had dreamed of a family that would heal those wounds, but instead, she had fallen into a different kind of trap. Yet now she was free. The next morning, Annalisa awoke with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She contacted her lawyer, instructing them to begin divorce proceedings. She wanted a clean break from Don and his family, a chance to reclaim her life. She then called her office, requesting a leave of absence. She needed time to heal, to rediscover herself, to chart a new course. In the weeks that followed, Annalisa set about rebuilding her life. She meticulously reviewed her finances, closing joint accounts with Don and redirecting her resources toward her own goals. She enrolled in a yoga class, finding solace in the rhythm of breath and movement. She swam laps at the local pool, the water washing away the residue of her past. She reconnected with old friends, their laughter and support reminding her of who she was before she became a wife, a daughter-in-law, a provider. It wasn't easy. Memories of Dawn lingered, moments of tenderness, shared dreams, the hope she had once held for their future. She questioned herself. Could she have done more to save their marriage? Could she have changed him? But each time, she recalled the years of being used, the disregard for her sacrifices, and she knew she had made the right choice. Weeks later, Annalisa returned to work with renewed vigor. She threw herself into her projects, her confidence and passion earning her the respect of colleagues and clients alike. She felt alive again, her days filled with purpose and possibility. One evening, her phone rang. It was Don. She hesitated, her finger hovering over the screen before answering. "Annalisa," he said, his voice soft and heavy with guilt. I need to apologize." She listened in silence, her heart a tangle of emotions. "I was wrong," he continued. "I was blind, foolish. I let my mother control me. I didn't see you, didn't value you. I'm so sorry." For a moment, Annalisa felt a pang of longing, a desire to believe he could change. But she knew too much had been broken. "Don," she said gently, "I appreciate your words, but we're too different now. We want different lives. I wish you well." She ended the call, tears streaming down her face, not for Don or their lost love, but for the dream of a family that had never materialized. Yet through her tears, she saw a new beginning. She was strong, capable, and free to shape her future. Lisbeth never accepted the loss of her financial lifeline. She tried to manipulate Don into winning Annalisa back, but he began to see through her tactics. He took a new job, moved into a modest apartment, and started therapy to confront his insecurities. He thought of Annalisa often, regretting the friend and partner he had lost. He held on to a faint hope that one day, as a better man, he might earn her forgiveness. Cornelis remained a silent observer, quietly relieved by Annalisa's departure. He had always sensed her unhappiness, though he lacked the courage to challenge his wife. Annalisa, meanwhile, thrived. She built a stellar career, bought a new home, and surrounded herself with friends who valued her for who she was. Her heart remained open to love, but she knew it would come from someone who saw her worth beyond her wallet. And if her path ever crossed Don's again, it would be a new story, one written